So a very good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PANACEA End User Workshop Session 7, which is on the Secure Behaviour Nudging Tool. We're here with our partners from the University of Northumbria. But first we'll pass the floor to Dr. Sabina Magalini from the Senior Surgeon at the Gemelli University in Rome. She'll give us a short welcome talk, and then I'll give you an overview of the agenda. Sabina, I know Sabina's on her phone this morning. Are you still able to join us by video, or shall I just pass the floor to you?
Just pass the floor. The video is a little bit of a problem this morning.
Okay, so the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning to all of you, and thank you for having joined this workshop. My name is Sabina Magalini, and I'm an emergency surgeon of the Policlinico Gemelli here in Rome. Our hospital is coordinating the PANACEA project. This project has the aim to deliver a set of people-centered cybersecurity solutions for healthcare. So in my role of project coordinator, I want to welcome you to the second end user workshop. And this is the last session of the tools that we are presenting. This workshop is dealing with one of the solutions, which is the nudging of our staff. Now, if I have to confess, this is my favorite part of the project, because also our hospital consistently helped in defining some of these solutions, and they're very down to earth, and I think they might be very useful. So I go back to thanking you for participating and giving us your precious time and the extensive experience I'm sure you have, and all your suggestions and evaluations will be put to good use to fine-tune all the tools that we are designing to help the hospitals in these difficult times. And I would like to say, well, welcome and have fun, because this is a beautiful, beautiful tool. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Sabina. So before I pass the floor to our presenters this morning, and I agree this is a really interesting approach to cybersecurity awareness in hospitals, we're just going to launch a couple of polls just to collect your information about how you fit into the PANACEA context in terms of stakeholder groups. So I invite my colleague Rita Giuffrida to launch the first poll. We'll just take you through, and then we'll do the presentations, and then we'll move on to Q&As and interactive discussions. So the first question is, which type of organisation are you representing? Is it a standards organisation, hospitals, clinics, or healthcare facilities? So from an end user perspective, patient association, medical device supplier organization, cybersecurity and privacy supply companies, SMEs or large enterprises, insurance companies, research organizations, policymakers and regulators, or is it some other group? So we'll give you a minute to answer. Host and panelists are not voting this morning. Rita, if you could keep us up to date on, where we are in terms of the percentage of people voting.
Yeah, actually, all of them voted. So I will just end in the poll and the results. Sorry, I will just mute the other participants because I was hearing a problem in the audio. Anyway, all the panelists, all the attendees voted, and we have 76% of people that are coming from the research organization, and the remaining 33% they are coming from cybersecurity and privacy supplier companies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll do our next poll. Okay, that's lovely, super. So there are the results. Can you launch the second poll then, please, Rita? Yep. This asks you more specifically about what role you play within those organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thanks.
Just a moment.
What is your specific role or field of expertise relevant for this particular workshop? Are you a hospital or other healthcare provider management level, manager in charge of staff behaviour and education, information technology manager, information security officer, risk manager, researcher in the technical side, so IT, bioengineering or information systems, researcher in the humanities, psychology or other organisational aspects? Or are you a cybersecurity and privacy provider or developer, or do you belong to some other groups?
Okay. I see that all the attendees already voted, so I will start sharing the results. And also in this case, we have the majority, 67%, that are coming from the research field in IT, bioengineering, and information systems, and the remaining 33 is coming from cybersecurity and privacy provider or developer.
Yeah, if you could just bear with me, I'm going to pass the floor in a minute. Yeah, thanks. So here we have the results. I'm just going to check a second. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see. I just want to see who is online this morning. So we have Christoph Laudias, Christos Nitos, and Hani Banayoti from CyberSolis. I'll just pass the floor to you three gentlemen just to give a brief introduction, to say who you are, who you work for, and what is your interest in PANACEA. So the floor is yours. Rita, you need to give them the right to unmute. Can you do that?
All right, hello everyone. My name is Christos Danos. I'm from the National Technical University of Athens. We are coordinating the project Sphinx. Sphinx is a very similar and related project to PANACEA, and our interest in PANACEA's results is very much intense, I would say, as is for every other project in the same cluster.
Okay, thank you very much. Who wants to be next?
I can go next if you like. So my name is Christos Laudias. I'm a research lecturer at the Kio Center of Excellence, the University of Cyprus. We are a partner in a Horizon 2020 Curex project for the secure and private exchange of healthcare data, quite relevant to PANACEA. And our interest in this, in the PANACEA project and this webinar, this workshop in particular, is because we are leading a task within the Curex project, which is related to cyber hygiene. And in our framework, this is about human-centered controls that can be applied in order to improve the cybersecurity and data privacy, let's say, awareness of the healthcare personnel. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Hani from CyberSolis. A little bit about us. We're a private sector consulting firm based in London. Our interest in the project is predominantly really to understand where it's going, see if there is any way we can contribute to it, and at the same time learn all the good outcomes that you guys are achieving, and at the same time help you with some of our experience and knowledge in the field if there's anything we can contribute to, and in order to provide a more positive and a pragmatic approach to what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks very much. In fact, you've given us already some very good feedback, so we thank you for that, and to all of you. We also have joined us Panos. Panos, my colleague Rita will give you the rights to unmute if you want to make a quick introduction of yourself, who you are, who you work for, and why you are interested in PANACEA.
Hello, everybody. My name is Panos Papachristou. I'm a doctor and researcher at Karolinska Institutet in Sweden, Stockholm. I'm also part of the Curex project, so we are under the same call as PANACEA. So my interest is to, like the previous speaker, to follow your progress and to get inspired with this with this nudging and this behavioral aspects of cybersecurity.
Yeah, thanks very much. So let me just put up
sorry, Stephanie, I wanted to ask to Panos if you are a researcher in the humanities side or in the technological side.
We are part of end users. So I'm also a doctor in family medicine. So we participate in the Curex project as end user providers.
Ah, okay. Okay, so you're a medical doctor. Okay.
Yes.
As a background. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you, Pasquale. So I'm going to pass the floor now to, I'm sorry, I can't see. First of all, to Professor Lynn Coventry from the University of Northumbria, who's going to talk us through, oh, sorry, Dr. Dawn Brandley-Bell. She's going to give us an introduction, and then we'll move on to her colleague, Professor Lynn Coventry. So without any further ado, then the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Please feel free, to post in any questions you have, also in the Q&A panel that you'll see at the bottom or the top of your screen. Okay, thanks. Off you go then. Thanks a lot. Let me just stop sharing. Sorry. There you go.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. One moment. Okay, can everyone see that?
You can see it, yeah, really well. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Perfect. So I'm just going to give an introduction to behaviour change and nudging, a general overview, and then an overview of the toolkit concept before I switch over to my colleague Lynn Coventry. So as Stephanie said, I'm Dr. Dawn Brandley-Bell. I'm a cyber psychologist based in Northumbria University in Newcastle in the UK. So I just want to start by saying today's workshop is about exploring cybersecurity behaviour, and in particular how we can influence people to behave more securely within the workplace. The first thing to recognise is that behaviour change is not easy, and that's certainly not unique to cybersecurity behaviours. And just to summarise that, I've got a quote here from an American professor of computer science and also a leading computer security expert. And he just provides a nice illustration of why change in behaviour is not easy, but also why it's important. So the quote starts, "Those of us in security are very much like heart doctors, cardiologists. Our patients know that a lack of exercise, too much fat and smoking are all bad for them. But they'll continue to smoke and eat fried foods and practice being couch potatoes until they have their infarction. Then they want a magic pill to make them better all at once and without the effort. And by the way, they'll claim loudly that their condition really isn't their fault. It was genetics or the tobacco companies or McDonald's that was to blame. And then they'll blame us for not taking better care of them." So he ends that quote actually by saying, does that sound familiar? So this quote just illustrates how regardless of the kind of technology we might put in place, that those security weaknesses will still exist unless we also change individuals' behaviour. So that's why we need to understand the behaviours of employees, as alongside understanding the type of technology interventions we can also put into place. There is no simple technology solution to cybersecurity. And I know computer science students are often told that the only secure system is one that has no users. And that's because we can put the most sophisticated defensive technologies in place, but then an insecure behaviour from an employee could render that useless. And of course, the attackers are well aware of this. So rather than spend hours trying to break through sophisticated defences, they're simply going to target the human users to let them in. Now, you might say, well, what's the problem if there's a security policy that tells employees how they're expected to behave? But it's just not as simple as that. Just because staff know what to do doesn't necessarily mean that they'll behave that way. And I'm sure we've all encountered this in our own workplaces. So this leads me on to that gap between knowledge and action. So we've got those security policies that specify the behaviours that are expected by the employees. And then we have awareness training that just ensures staff are aware those policies exist. They're told why those expected behaviours are important and how to implement them. But despite that, there's still that substantial body of research that is showing that that knowledge alone isn't sufficient to translate into actual behaviour. And that's where we need to bridge that gap between knowledge and behaviour. And that's exactly where interventions such as behavioural nudging can come into play. So I thought I'd start by providing an overview of nudging and provide some good examples of nudging in action. So firstly, behavioural nudging, just in case anyone's not aware, this refers to a technique that's used to nudge, to encourage people towards a preferred behaviour. So in this instance, in the case of PANACEA and some of the related projects that we've just heard about, this would be nudging people to behave in a more secure way. And nudges achieve this by making changes to either the physical, the social, or the psychological context that is driving the behaviour. And that's where I just want to emphasise that nudging is about encouragement. It's not about taking away freedom of choice. The individual should always have the option not to engage in the behaviour that's being nudged or encouraged. And I'm going to return to talk about ethics around nudging in a minute. But as I said, I just want to show some examples of nudging in action. So I'm going to start with quite a fun one. I'm just going to play this short video, and this is to show an intervention that was introduced in Stockholm. And this is to encourage people to use the stairs instead of the escalator. So I love that example. That's just a nice, fun example of an actually very effective nudge. But what I'll just do is I'll give some examples specifically related to security as well. So if we look on the left of the screen, where you have the eyes and the "We are watching you" slogan, this is a well-known application of behavioural nudging. So there's a lot of research now to show that the presence of eyes watching you, even if it's just on a poster, can nudge people towards more honest behaviour. So this has been used, for example, to reduce the theft of bicycles that are left outside a workplace, or to encourage people to contribute money to honesty boxes, for example, in shared offices. And the next two examples I want to show are specifically related to cybersecurity. So in the middle of the screen, you've got a set of coloured cards, and these were designed as a set of nudges to encourage employees to abide by the clear desk policy. So not to leave information on the desk and not to leave their workstation unlocked when unattended. So the idea is that other employees will leave the appropriate card on the unattended desk, and that acts as a nudge. So if an individual's cleared the desk and they've locked their workstation, they might receive the green clear desk superhero card. So that acts as a bit of a form of positive reinforcement, and it's rewarding that desired behaviour. Of course, that could lead to that individual repeating that behaviour in the future. But alternatively, if they've left their information on the desk, their workstation's unlocked, there's a lot of sensitive information on there, then the employee may receive a red card, and that just prompts them to consider the value of the information that they left freely available. And that's designed to discourage the behaviour, and that can work in several ways. So it's increasing the salience of the risk to the individual, it's prompting them to think about what could have happened, but it's also acting as a form of social pressure, as they've received that red card due to a fellow employee noticing their behaviour. So it's quite interesting, those social influences and what that influence they can have on behaviour. And the yellow cards act as more of an awareness and salience nudge. So they just remind individuals to think about the information on their computer before they walk away from their workstation. For example, the one on the front asks people to consider whether they would allow someone to access their internet banking. And then it compares that to the value of the information that could be accessed on that computer. Now, sticking with nudging individuals to lock workstations, the nudge on the right is also designed to do this. So this little device was developed by a UK university, and the lights work on a proximity sensor. So it detects when the individual's getting up to leave their desk, and then it uses either a series of lights, but can also use sounds and vibrations to prompt that user to lock their workstation before they walk away. Now, the reason I've included this one is this is a lovely example of one of the main advantages of nudges, and that's that they are timely. If you consider security training and awareness training, it often takes place as a separate course or as part of an induction session. It takes place outside of the everyday work and context. In comparison, the nudges are there to nudge that person at the time that the behaviour would take place. So while it's very easy that someone could accidentally forget some knowledge they were taught in training, or just get distracted, particularly if they're in a very busy or high pressure environment, such as working in a healthcare centre, then it's very easy that that training wouldn't be effective, whereas a nudge in the moment could be more effective. So that's something to bear in mind, is that nudges are timely. And I appreciate that these nudges might look simple, but they have all been shown to be effective in significantly influencing behaviour change. So I've demonstrated that nudges in the right context can be effective, but of course there's always someone that's willing to exploit a technique for their own good, and indeed nudging has been used for the wrong reasons. So a common example of this is phishing emails. So phishing emails often nudge us towards clicking on links by invoking a sense of fear or urgency. So a common one that we've probably all received at some point is the phishing email that threatens that our email account is about to be deactivated, and it prompts us to click now to stop this happening. And then another common one is the email with an attached invoice. And then there's very little information actually included in the body of the email. So many users will be concerned that they've suddenly been billed for something they didn't expect to be charged for. They'll quickly open that attachment to check what the details are, and then they've potentially invited malware into the system. So these are nudges that are done to exploit. There are also other nudges that are designed unethically that we might come across on an everyday basis. So as I briefly touched on before, when you're implementing nudges appropriately, they shouldn't be misleading, and it should be very easy for the user to opt out of the nudge. But we often come across examples where this isn't the case. So I've recently done some work into the unethical use of cookie pop-ups on websites. And I'm sure we're all pretty tired by now of the constant pop-ups that we're presented with when we want to just quickly access a website, quickly find the information we want, and that's that. But instead we have this security pop-up asking us to go through and choose which cookies we consent to. And I'm sure you've probably noticed that it's often difficult to find the opt-out button. And that's not by accident. The designers are deliberately building unethical nudges to nudge us to just accept those cookies. So I've put a couple of examples on the screen. The top example, as you can see, the accept and continue to site button is nice and bold and colourful, very easy to see. It also highlights the desired behaviour. So the user just wants to continue to that site as quickly as possible. In comparison, the button to deny the cookies is greyed out, it's very little, and it doesn't highlight that you will still continue to the site if you click that. Then if you look at the second example underneath, in this example, there isn't even an opt-out button. So if you want to find out more, you have to press and read through the practice privacy statement. And in comparison, the only button that's there is a bright orange one that says agree and close. And again, it's highlighting that desired behavior, that if you click here, you'll get rid of this annoying pop-up as quickly as possible. So that's some commonplace examples of potentially unethical use of cookies. And of nudges, sorry. So you can find some great examples of different exploitative nudges on the Dark Patterns website, and I've included the link there in case you just want to check that out in your own time. But I've just included this to highlight that, yes, it is possible that nudging is used for the wrong reasons, but our toolkit is designed specifically to encourage ethical nudging. So what we do to do that is we ask the users to recognize that there are different levels of potential intervention. So each level invokes a greater level of control. And what we encourage with the toolkit is that the user should always apply nudges ethically by choosing the least intrusive and effective option. So I've shown on the screen here something that's referred to as the ethical intervention ladder. And it just demonstrates that concept of different levels of intervention, going from no control all the way to eliminating choice completely. And generally nudging sits somewhere in the middle there. So what I'll do is I'll use encouraging stronger passwords as an example of these different levels. So say we start at the least intrusive level, we could just do nothing and hope that users will start to use stronger passwords. Yes, that's probably not very likely. Or we could provide them with information such as how a stronger password will protect them, or give them some indication about how strong their password is. So for example, on the left here, I've provided a password strength indicator. So you've all seen these. It goes from red to green, changes percentage depending on how strong the password you've typed in is. If we want to go a step further, we could potentially improve upon that by telling the user what they need to do to make a strong password, in case they're not aware of that. Or we could even decide to experiment with different incentives or disincentives. So that could be, for example, paying a fine if your password is cracked within a certain time, for example, at work. And then if we go up to the next level, so if we look at this orange box, this restrict choice box, we could restrict the choice of password by applying specific criteria. So this is a very common one. Again, it's shown on the example on the left there, where we're often provided with criteria that our password must meet. So they must have a certain amount of characters, at least one number, no spaces, example. And then finally, if we wanted to eliminate choice altogether, so the very top level of that intervention ladder, we could just provide users with a password. So provided by us and they can't change it. So that's an example of the different levels of intervention. And again, I just want to emphasize that we encourage users to always use the least intrusive option that is still effective. So I've said how nudging how it's effective. I've said how it can be used wrongly. I also want to cover whether nudging always works. And the simple answer is no, it doesn't. In some cases, nudges which have proved very successful in one situation, they just don't work in another. And it's important to consider the specific context. So this is one of the main reasons why developing a toolkit to provide organisations, because doing it this way, we're providing the organisation with the methods to design their own nudges, rather than trying to provide some pre-designed off-the-shelf intervention, which just might not be suitable for their working context. So I'm just going to give a few examples of nudges that didn't quite have the desired effect, and these are real-world examples. So I'm showing 3 on the screen there now. The first one is that there was some financial incentives introduced in Sweden to encourage people to donate blood. And actually the result was that less women donated blood. And the reason they gave for that was that they felt that people would then perceive them as just being after the money rather than donating blood for more altruistic reasons, so to help others. The second example is that some schools have started to introduce fines for parents who don't pick up their children on time after school. And in some instances, the school have found this has actually increased the problem. So the reason being was that the fine was now not being perceived as almost a cost of cheap childcare, whereas prior to that, parents were more motivated by that moral obligation and being a sign of a good parent to be on time to collect their child. So that's another example of a nudge that had the opposite effect. And the last example, so this is one that my colleague Lynn actually worked with the Army on, was a scoreboard that was introduced to promote green or environmentally friendly driving amongst Army drivers. So the idea was that by preserving fuel, benefits could allow the drivers to conduct more rescue missions, or that bit of fuel that was saved might enable them to drive that bit further to save another colleague before they have to return to base. Unfortunately, introducing this scoreboard where they showed the greenest drivers, it actually had the opposite effect and fuel consumption actually went up. And the reason that was given was that the drivers didn't recognise the benefits of driving more greenly during battle. What they thought was important was driving fast. So they inferred that this was just the government trying to save money, and so they rebelled against it. So what I'm just trying to demonstrate here is that our behaviour is massively influenced by what's referred to as social sense making. So our behaviour is influenced by what we perceive other people want us to do, why we think they want us to do that, and what we think others will think of us if we behave in a certain way. So when designing nudges, you need to be very aware of these social influences. And our toolbox is providing the methods for that, from identifying the driving factors behind the insecure behaviour through to techniques to assess whether nudges might have unintended consequences before they're rolled out more widely in the work setting. So then I'm just going to finish with a quick summary of the Secure Behaviour Nudging Toolkit. I know I've touched on this throughout this presentation, but then Lynn will go into much more detail about the different steps in the following sessions. So as I've said, the toolkit is basically a set of tools or methods, if you like, that are designed to be applied in a flexible way and in a way that can address the unique context of the healthcare organisation in question, and that it will help identify, design and implement appropriate nudges where it is appropriate to do so. So we're specifically designing the toolkit to not require specific technical expertise. It's also designed to be empathetic to time constraints and high staff workload. We very much understand that working in the healthcare sector can be a high pressure job. We don't want to burden staff any further. And we also want to respect and maintain the emphasis on patient care. Obviously, this is a very patient-focused job. The patient comes first, and we don't want to put any interventions into place that could negatively impact on that. So the toolkit will help an organisation to work through the three broad steps that are illustrated on the right here. That includes identifying what insecure behaviours are occurring in that particular workplace, why those occur, so that includes staff motivations and goals for the insecure behaviour, but also barriers that might be preventing them acting more securely. And it also provides methods for identifying and designing appropriate interventions and appropriate nudges, again, where they are appropriate. It will also point users to other interventions if they would be more suited, such as policy interventions and things like that. And then it has some tools on evaluating intervention effectiveness and then reassessing the cybersecurity position of the organisation on an ongoing basis. So the toolkit is designed to be a reiterative process that you just repeat. You run through once and then repeat and reassess what other behaviours might need addressed. So each of those steps, as I said, they were discussed in more detail. I'm going to pass over to Lynn now, although I believe I'm going to present the slides and Lynn will do the audio. So if you give me 2 seconds to change presentation. Okay, Lynn, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Dawn. Morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. I'm just letting Dawn present because my computer was crashing yesterday, so she'll have to wing it if anything happens during this presentation. Apologies. I'd also just like to note that our toolkit is still work in progress. We're still developing it. So we value any feedback on ideas about what we do show you and anything that you think we've missed or might be valuable for us to consider. Yeah, so next slide, Dawn. Oh, I guess I should say we were originally brought onto the project to actually design the nudges, but through our work we've decided it would be more beneficial for the project team to have this toolkit rather than just one set of nudges that we work through the project. So let's start with, there's 3 phases to the way we address this problem. And step 1 is actually identifying the insecure behaviours and the underlying causes for those behaviours. We tend to use our toolkit within workshop sessions, but it can be supplemented with different delivery mechanisms which we're starting to explore. The attendees of the work group will all belong to the same team. The reason for that is it starts to reveal the real security culture within a team. And it can also act to kickstart some thinking about cybersecurity, about that team's culture and the responsibility they have. We do this within this sort of small local teams because we appreciate that the culture may differ in different teams within large organizations. And it's very easy for sort of subcultures to creep into large organizations such as healthcare organizations. What we're trying to do in this first stage is not only to identify the insecure behaviors, but also to identify the attitudes towards cybersecurity, this team's sort of social norms, and the underlying reasons that cybersecurity policy is circumvented. You know, we're not saying that people are bad, that they're deliberately behaving insecurely. They've found workarounds to the policy that work for them and allow them to be productive and do their jobs effectively. And we need to understand these underlying reasons and how we can address them. These sessions should be run regularly and behaviours monitored regularly, as we appreciate they will change over time. As the threats change and systems within the institutions change, so will the behaviours. Next slide, Dawn. So the toolkit for this step or this stage provides the following. Firstly, it provides guidance on how to ensure that workshops are effective, non-shaming and confidential, the optimal numbers and how to structure these groups so that we can encourage openness and honesty. And this is important, that it is a no-blame culture and that there will be no comeback on any participants about their behaviour. And if we don't have that in place from higher management, then it's very hard for us to get to the truth about the actual behaviours. We will provide semi-structured interview script templates to guide people through the conversations that they want to have with these teams, to allow the conversation to flow and to highlight any issues that may come up. We will start off these discussions with behaviour lists. We have identified areas, specific behaviours that we think are good practice, that we've taken from government guidelines on good practice. But these need to be fine-tuned to an individual organisation's security policies. Dawn, can you mute, please?
I can't seem to mute. Can someone mute me, because I'm presenting, so it won't give me a mute button?
Ah, okay. Oh, there we go. We will also develop an influencer template to show you how to record the underlying causes of the behaviour. And we are looking to extend these to provide templates for interviews and also for observations and ethnography within organisations. So once we've identified the insecure behaviours, we move on to further workshops to help identify the factors driving these behaviours. Next slide. So in terms of questions that we seek to ask, one of our tools provides a more open exploration of cybersecurity and behaviours within the organisation without any prompting from us about what is secure, what isn't secure. So the types of questions that will be in this tool are things like whether or not people have experienced a cybersecurity incident, as we know that actual experience is more likely to drive behaviours. We ask them to explore what happened in it and what they think, how they think behaviour contributed to this incident. We ask them what they think needs to be protected within the workplace. and what they can do to keep the workplace secure, what behaviours they don't see that they think are necessary, and what circumstances drive people to behave insecurely. If you'll note that so far we haven't described any of these behaviours, and we could have natural conversations here which are highlighting what's most important to them without us prompting with any checklist. However, Dawn, next slide. But then we can also look specifically at the behaviours, and we will maintain the behaviour checklist and ask people to explore specific questions. These will be fine-tuned, as I've said, according to the information policy within the individual organisations. So that could be exploring how access control is managed, how passwords are managed, the amount of access to documents via email, and reasons for opening documents in email, whether or not Facebook, other social media is permitted, whether workers on night shifts are sitting downloading films, etc. Do you seeking whether or not they have permission to download unofficial versions of software onto their work computers, how frequently they use USB devices and why, which USB devices they would use as well. So a number of questions here, and as I've said, all coming from the sort of best practice guidelines within the sort of government guidelines. So from these sort of questionings, so it'll identify a number of behaviours that we may seek to influence. And within the workshops, we would then prioritise the ones that we were going to look at in more detail. So next slide, Dawn. So the next tool is to explore a specific behaviour in more detail. Not all behaviours will be influenced in the same way, so it's important to work through each behaviour individually in more detail. This approach may identify some overlap between influence of behaviours, but you can imagine that what influences a person to create a strong password is not the same as what will influence a person to click on a link in an email. And so it's important to investigate all fully. So we have put together this influencer worksheet, and it's based on tried and tested psychological models, and they help initiate the conversations that we need to have to understand the factors that are driving the insecure behaviour. As I've said before, we do recognise that these behaviours are not just simply being bad for the sake of it, but there are these underlying reasons. In the model on the left-hand side, you will see that there isn't just a link to behaviour, but there's also a link to intention. This is very common within psychological models of behaviour, which believe that people have to want to or intend to behave a certain way to drive that behaviour forward. But one of the interesting things about nudges is it circumvents intention and acts straight on the behaviour, just looking to design the behaviour, design the environment to nudge the behaviour without the person having to think about that behaviour at all. So let's step through some of these influencers. First of all, we want to understand the person's attitude towards the behaviour, what they feel about this behaviour, how it supports their values, which in a healthcare setting is saving people's lives, understanding the conditions of patients rather than being secure. We need to look at their instrumental attitudes, what they believe about the costs and the benefits that this behaviour brings. Then the next level down, we look at the social norms that are existing within this group or this team. There's two types of social norms that we investigate. First of all, what people believe that other people expect them to do. So they're what they think people expect of them within their team. And then we also look at the descriptive social norm. Who else behaves this way? So what role models are there in their environment that behave this way, that they're potentially copying? And how important are these people to them? And who behaves differently, and how important are those people to them? We then look at the personal agency that people feel they have. So whether or not they perceive they have any control over this behavior, and whether or not they feel they have the authority to change that behavior, and then exploring the reasons behind that. So these are all factors which are known to influence intention. But then there's other factors which act straight on behavior, so we explore them. First of all, we look at the salience of the behavior. What is it about this behavior that means it's the top of your head way of behaving all the time? Is there anything in the environment that is making them think they need to change? Salience is a strange one, and it's one of these things. In Don's example, you showed how making the button that people want you to press more obvious, then you automatically behave that way. Salience is also fun and humor is often used to make behaviors that people want you to do more salient, as in the stairs. We then explore the environmental and the technology constraints that are driving this behavior. So what is it about the environment, the job, the technology that means that they're behaving this way and that it's difficult for them to change this behavior? And lastly, it's worth looking at habit and convenience. By this I mean just how long have they been behaving this way? How habitual has this behavior become? We know that strong habits are harder to break. In what ways is this making your life easier? Or in what ways is it by convenience? I would also link that to appropriateness. So for instance, we will hear people saying that they use their mobile phone while they're working with a patient because they don't want to leave the patient and have to go to a workstation to access information. So it's more convenient for them to access the information on their mobile phone. Next slide, Dawn. So in another tool that we're using in our toolkit is Mindspace. This is just a framework that pulls together many different influencers from different theories, and it provides a way of framing questions to explore the problem space. There is an overlap with the method I've shown you before, but sometimes addressing the issue from different directions means that you eventually get to the root issues. So Mindspace is an acronym for these different groupings of known influencers. So for instance, Messenger investigates who is influential within that group or that organization, who will people listen to and who will people look to as a role model. Incentives looks at what rewards or sanctions there are in the environment that could be driving the behavior. Norms looks at the social norms, as I've described before. How do other people behave? How do you feel other people expect you to behave? Defaults and designs looks at the way the environment and the technology is set up, whether the default setting is set as secure or as insecure, and in what ways the design is influencing your choice of behaviors. Salience, as I've described before, how is your attention drawn to this behavior or not drawn to this behavior? Priming is a strange one. So priming is about how in the past you've been primed towards a particular behavior. So for instance, you know, in some cultures we're brought up meaning that red means danger. So anytime we see something written in red, we initially react to it as if it is something that will be in danger to us. Some experiments in psychology have shown that if you prime people with information about older adults, that they're frail, that they have difficulty moving, etc., and people sort of engage with this information, when you then ask them to do a task, they will do that slower and with more difficulty than they would have if they were primed with information about a young, energetic person. Affect and emotions and egos is looking at how emotions drive our behavior. We like to behave in ways that we feel good about ourselves, that make us feel positive. So these questions are about exploring that sort of emotional reaction to either the security behavior or the insecure behavior. Commitment, we know that making a public commitment to something means you're more likely to carry out that behavior, so we can explore what commitments have been made. And then, yes, exploring the environment and what is it about the environment that's driving this behavior. Next slide. So here's some examples from a session that we have ran where sharing passwords was identified as a problem within a number of institutions. Seniors shared their credentials with junior staff and with administrators, and nurses shared their credentials with new starts. So then in following through on why this was happening, we found that this was happening because it was an essential way to meet productivity demands and to attend to patients quickly, that junior staff didn't have access to the information that they needed, and that they felt that this was needed to do their job well and save patients' lives. They didn't perceive any costs associated with this behavior, as they trusted their colleagues. And they found big benefits in productivity. So for instance, if it takes 2 weeks for IT to give credentials to a new start, you couldn't have a new start not being able to access systems for 2 weeks. So it was seen as providing that productivity benefit. In terms of the social norms, junior staff believed that senior staff expect them to accept the shared credentials, that senior staff expect junior staff to work this way. But junior staff in a way feel that they have to, because the senior staff will write their reference at the end of the rotation. So they feel they have to comply. They believe that everybody in the organization behaves this way, and that management are well aware of this. They don't perceive it's possible for them to change the way they're working this way unless the whole system is changed. They don't believe they would be able to do their job if sharing passwords was to be banned. And they highlighted areas in the environment that drove this behavior, and that also they felt that being unwilling to share passwords would actually show that you didn't trust your colleagues and would cause social problems as well. Next. Yep, so that's the end of step 1, which is just about trying to explore the behaviors that exist and what's driving those behaviors. We're now going to open for some discussion and feedback rather than running through to the end. Is that possible, Stephanie?
Yes, it is. Thanks very much, both of you. Do we have any questions or comments about what you've seen so far about the secure nudging tool and techniques? You can put your hand up as well if you have any comments. Or if you can just say you'd like to speak also in the chat so that we can give you the right to unmute.
Panos raised the hand.
Hi, everybody. Panos here from Stockholm. No, I just agree with everything that you say. I mean, I like the whole structure of the background theory, and from the clinical part where I work from, I mean, it has to be a general interest also from all the layers, from the managing position down for secure behavior. Otherwise, it will be a difficulty to implement any strategy. So it has to be like, I've been struggling to pursue some of these ideas that you presented today also in my clinical work, but they fail for somehow. And I think it's the manager also that is not supporting, I mean, this kind of behavior, I mean.
You mean they're not supporting change to more secure?
Yeah, I mean, you brought up this example with the nurses, and there are so many examples that are, I mean, even for a layman, apparently threatening for cybersecurity reasons, but they're just still working as they always done, and there has been no incidents, and they're not interested in changing. So, I mean, of course, if you want to invest time and dissect why do they not change, but for them, there has been no incident, so they just keep on working. It's a private healthcare center, so it's not a government owned. So they're doing it their own way since they're private, learning by doing.
Yeah, I think it is a problem with security in that, you know, you've not suffered an attack yet, so it must be okay, but you're sort of leaving yourself open to risk. Yeah, there is a big initiative in the UK around getting executive buy-in, and I agree, if, you know, and that's where the messenger comes in. You know, if it's not top down, you know, it won't happen, because you can see from the examples, it's not just the behavior that needs to change, it's everything around it that's supporting the behavior often.
Yes, true. I mean, a very short example, we have this two-factor authentication with your card, your doctor's or nurse card. Yeah. It also works an ID, a public ID, so it's a very valuable item. People leave it at work in their docking station. They leave it overnight because they can access through TeamViewer from home. So I really do not consent to this behavior, but people do it.
Yeah. So
first you have theft, just physical theft from anybody from the room, because everybody has keys to all rooms, ID. And the second, TeamViewer, I mean, yeah. Just an example to access there, and then you have direct access to the EHR and the whole system.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why we're interested in that sort of attitude and culture as well as the nudges. Else we'll just get pushback on, you know, you'll get the sort of backfiring of the nudges if you don't do some work on attitude as well. Okay, thank you. Shall we move on, or we'll probably...
Hi, Christos Danos from National Technical University of Athens. There was a phrase that actually caught my ear at some point about the perception that the only way to solve these security issues is by changing the entire system, or at least this is what the employees that have the unsecure behavior think. So my question here is, since I'm coming from an IT background, I know that this is not necessarily the case, that you can insert, let's say, even a disruptive technology in the process, and in a short while being able to nudge the behavior without actually having to do a lot of work. But where do you think that the idea, the opinion that you need to change the entire way of working in order to secure some aspects of it comes from?
I think with the examples I gave, I think it was clear that you did need to change the whole system, because in the country that it happened, the legal system doesn't allow junior doctors access to health records. And they feel they can't do their job if they don't have those access. So in that sense, you know, and taking 2 weeks to get credentials for a new start is why they felt they couldn't stop sharing passwords. There are, I mean, there are other examples, and I would always seek to work with IT, you know, this is their perception and not necessarily reality. So for instance, staying logged on to workstations and devices because they perceived that it would take too long to start up again. You know, you would have to go into the background of whether that was the case and whether or not you could change things. But yeah, you're right, it is perception, and part of our work
it's the fact that they feel powerless, right?
Yeah, they do feel powerless to change it. Yeah.
So I had this this discussion a while back, I think about a year ago, with some people from the European Commission about this subject, and my, let's say, opinion, I would say, about how to most effectively bring about change in security in hospitals was that it has to be a top-down approach, but nudging is a bottom-up approach, and this sense of insecurity sorry, not insecurity, of inability to create change, isn't it a bit, let's say, ironic from the side of the doctors to ask them to change their behavior while the administration is not taking the necessary steps to do so itself?
Yeah, it is a two-pronged approach. I think, you know, these behaviors have been ingrained for many years. The attitudes are really quite negative towards change, which is why we're looking at whether or not we can change the environment and nudge towards the behavior we need without having to actually engage that attitude change necessarily, but while at the same time still trying to promote the attitude change from the top down. But culture change is slow, so it's like trying to solve what we can immediately with nudges, but then have a different approach to developing a different culture at the same time. And somewhere in the middle, we have to have sort of more usable and appropriate technology that meets the needs of the healthcare staff. So, you know, another example I would give is the common use of WhatsApp to have communication between team members and to send images of either the health record or of the patient between team members. And they believe that's secure because it's WhatsApp and it's encrypted and they're told WhatsApp's secure. But it's not using the real system, so there's risks that information isn't recorded on the official system, which is risks to the patient, not necessarily cybersecurity. But the tools that are getting developed as workstation tools and not as mobile tools. But then technology keeps on moving so quickly that it costs so much to completely change the infrastructure. You know, that they aren't necessarily going to move to that most modern technology that people are expecting from their everyday lives to also work in their work environment. But yeah, the cost of the cost of updating is just so great. I mean, the UK is still sitting with old operating systems because the cost of upgrading all instantly was just too great, even after WannaCry.
Right. So it's it's like everyone has reached the point of desperation where you cannot do anything with the administration because they always have bureaucracy is cumbersome, and that they're very difficult to bring about political change or anything like that. So we're trying another approach to make the change come from the employees themselves. Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I guess there's an example I used to use, and I haven't got it in here, and it was just showing like when we try to change behavior, it does need multiple approaches, and it's so I often use the driving as an example of, you know, how when people speed, you can ask them not to speed, you can set the speed limits, but then, you know, you might bring in, but then we brought in seatbelts because the issue wasn't necessarily speeding, it was the accident. But bringing in seatbelts had a backfire of people driving faster because they felt there was less risk of harm if they did crash in the short term. But then we bring in policies, we bring in laws, we bring in fines, you know, we change the entire attitude. As behaviors change, the messaging changes from not speeding to not drinking and driving to not drug and driving. It's sort of a constant process that we
improving the road system, among others.
Yeah.
So the responsibility of the state, the responsibility of the manufacturers, the responsibility of the citizens. All right. Okay.
Yeah. And software is the only product in the world where you're allowed to put out a faulty system and then blame the users when there's holes in your system. So yeah, I guess we better get on or we'll be behind.
Yeah, okay, right. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your feedback.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
So the next stage in our process is to actually move on to exploring and designing the nudges themselves. But first of all, we have to find ways of prioritizing which behaviors that we're going to address. After we've chosen that behavior, we can then look at what nudges on that behavior might actually look like. Then once we have a list of potential nudges, we have to work to narrow them down to a smaller set that we're going to prototype. Next. So which behaviors do we prioritize? So from the initial sessions, we will have a whole list of different behaviors. We should then work with the administration, with IT, etc., to try and prioritize these behaviors. And these are the types of questions that we would be asking ourselves in deciding which behavior. First of all, we might ask whether or not this behavior is actually acceptable. It may be circumventing policy, but it may be that the policy needs to change rather than the behavior. And we should always ask that question. So an example of that can be not writing your password down. You know, advice in the UK on that has changed to, yes, write your passwords down, but make sure you keep those passwords secure, because they want to encourage people to have multiple passwords. So they've slightly shifted their policy on that. Second question would be in looking at the suitability of this behavior for nudging. Is this something that we can change just at the source of the behavior rather than needing a whole policy change or even the law to be changed to facilitate the behavior that we want? So from that, it's like, are there knock-on consequences? So if I simply say that junior doctors are not allowed to use their senior doctors' login credentials, what knock-on effects would that have that would prevent that from working? We might also ask whether knowledge is the solution. So some of these behaviors, we might find that they really were unaware that that behavior was inappropriate, and that an awareness campaign is more appropriate for that. It may be that there's a technological solution that we could implement that immediately bypasses the reliance on human behavior. So for instance, with humans reacting to phishing emails, the more of those emails that technology can screen out, the less reliant we are on the human behavior itself. So after we've worked through all of that, we would then look with the behaviors that we have left to address, we would look at the risk severity. So how likely it is that something will go wrong as a result of this behavior, and what is the severity of the consequences of that. And then we might assess the behavior frequency and how widespread this behavior is as a means of prioritization. Next. Done. So one of the key things I find is that working with the target of the nudge, working in workshops with your potential users to actually design the nudges has multiple benefits in itself. Simply taking part in the process of these workshops can start the process of behavior change. And also with some of the nudges, it can immediately identify what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And we start getting at some more underlying issues as we work through the design of the nudges. So rather than going away and just designing nudges and then implementing them on the users, it is useful to involve users in these workshops. It's important at this stage that we brainstorm as many ideas as possible, and we don't start critiquing and evaluating at the same time as we're designing, so that we get as many options as possible. And here we turn to Mindspace again to help us develop nudges, and we also refer back to the ethical ladder to determine if other levels of intervention are required and assessing if they're appropriate or not. Our toolkit will eventually provide examples of nudges that we have found to help kickstart this process. And remembering that nudges need to occur at the point where, as near to the point of the behavior as possible. Next, Dawn. So I've put together this slide which shows you nudge ideas that have been put together to improve password strength. So you could look at the messenger, as you said, coming from an influential person, showing, as we were discussing there, that senior staff are behaving this way, and we might target senior staff first before we roll it out to others. So who would need to send that message? Who would need to be showing that behavior to influence this group? We can look at the incentives. There's discussions around rewards for passwords which take a long time to break, or rewards for those that are strongest theoretically to crack your password. Now, in the sense of nudging in its truest sense, introducing sanctions and fines wouldn't be an ethical option, but it's always worth looking at different levels of intervention as well. Norms, we might look to how we can use social norms. So we might put out a message when somebody's designing a new password, telling them how many people have stronger passwords than they have. You could introduce a badge which they can wear if they have a strong password, or my badge hasn't been broken yet, has your, oh sorry, my password's not been broken yet, has yours. You can change the default so that you don't allow insecure passwords. Salience, you could run password crackers on staff passwords, requesting a change when a password's been cracked and making it very pertinent to them that their password has been cracked. Other ways is telling people when their password's on the list of the 100 most common passwords. And then that can play to the social norms, like 20 people in your team have the same password as you. Did you know? We might use posters around the environment to prime people to behave securely. We might send people emails explaining the need for a strong password just before we ask them to reset their password. We might look at changing the default of how many times a password needs to be changed if we want to encourage them to have stronger passwords. We could ask them to sign a public commitment to only use strong passwords. And we can, in our messaging, we might link it to their desire to protect their patients and the emotions that might be associated if somebody did get into a medical device or into patient data and cause harm. Next. So as part of the toolkit for each of the different types of nudges that we come up with, we were hoping that we would provide templates for how they might go about designing them, again, based on the sort of underlying psychological theories. So here we're presenting a template for a poster that's showing people how they might look to lay out the poster and drawing their attention to the reasons why different information might be in different places, the amount of information that they should have on a poster, etc. Repeating the message in different places on the poster. So around that, each of those little boxes gives you a sort of bite-sized chunk of theory, which has been applied to developing that specific nudge. Next. So after we have our potential nudges, and we may have a big list of different nudges that we want to investigate, the next thing that we would do is prioritize the actual nudges and involve other people in the organization, management, IT, the users, the staff themselves who are going to be targeted, potentially don't play as big a role here. But we look to assess the technological feasibility of the idea. So for instance, if it requires a software change, do we own the software? Do we have the rights to change it? How feasible would it be to introduce a different default, for instance, on a piece of software? The time and ease of implementation. So how long would it take to develop this nudge? Is it something we can do easily, or is it something we have to put out to tender, etc.? How much this nudge would disrupt the work processes as they exist today. So if for instance, we introduced biometrics, so there was no sharing of passwords, what disruption would that cause to the existing work processes? Does it require a policy change, either within the company or the government? The financial cost of implementation, the estimated effectiveness. Now, here I would ask people to reserve judgment on effectiveness of nudges. So what seems very simple can actually be really effective. But a lot of the time, when you come up with nudges, people think it won't change their behavior at all and will instantly reject them. So it is useful here to reserve judgment until you've piloted and have some evidence. And we'd also look at the long-term sustainability of the nudge within the organization, and also its generalizability. So how widespread is this problem? Do we think that the solution would generalize outside of the teams that we've been working with? Next. So, and we would provide a an evaluation spreadsheet that allows the different nudges to be listed as they are there. You probably can't see the detail, but that's just a list of the nudges down the left-hand side, the different evaluation criteria along this top, a scoring mechanism to come up with a feasibility score. However, sometimes when you go through this process, your gut instinct is the one that comes, you know, the sum of the parts is different to the whole. So what comes out from the individual criteria, sometimes your gut instinct is that that's not the best. So I would also include a sort of overall assessment of just given that space to react to your gut instinct as well about the particular nudge. And I see that quite often when I'm doing even grant reviews, when I'm working for UKRI. It's interesting how you can score things on all the individual criteria that you've been given, but then you just don't really believe that that's the best or the worst project when you come to the end of it all. Next. So just to finish up this sort of section, what we would hope to do in our toolkit is give lots of different ideas of nudges that have been implemented in different organizations and different settings to act as prompts that people can build on. These are 3 that we are taking to pilot at the moment. The first is a poster about logging out. The language that you see there is Gaelic. This is for use in Ireland. Asking people to think about logging out. The second one is a set of badges that we would give out so that people can show where they sit with regards to password sharing. So an interesting idea there was the blue badge, which is please don't ask me to share my password. So it's trying to prevent a socially uncomfortable situation where you're asked for passwords, but you don't feel comfortable sharing it. But you also don't feel comfortable saying no to somebody. That was an interesting way to deal with it. And then at the end, there's just a bit of fun there that's making the risk associated with using USB devices a bit more salient by putting the shark's teeth around. You know, we can't prevent USB use in all cases because it is accepted, but it's asking people to think a bit more about the USB. Okay, next. Okay. Yep, so just a few examples, but curious to see what you think about ability to actually come up with nudge ideas with staff. Stephanie, can you open the mics again, please?
Yep, we will. Yeah, thanks a lot, Lynn. That was really, really interesting. So participants, please feel free to make any comments or ask questions. The super discussions earlier on, I'm sure that we can carry on with this. So Rita, you should be able to give them the ability to open up their mics.
Yes.
Or you could stick your hand up if you've got a question or comment to make, or just speak out. Yeah, thanks, Rita.
I see that Christos is actually would like actually to ask a question, so I'm going to unmute him. Christos, are you able to speak now?
Yeah. Remember that you have to directly unmute, okay? We just give you the right to talk. anyone have any comments? I can't hear anyone, Lynn, so maybe we could just move forward.
Okay, so the last stage that we have is to actually evaluate the effectiveness of these nudges. And here, I'm not going to talk too much about this. This is something we still really are just developing. But here I want to emphasize the importance of an initial pilot to assess whether or not you will get any backlash from your nudge, and to ensure that you check that there's no unintentional negative impacts from the nudge. So next slide. I've forgotten what I've written here. Oh yeah. So yeah, I want to emphasize the importance of piloting before you go into a full development of a nudge and before you roll out. We have seen, as Dawn mentioned in the introduction, you know, what has worked successfully in some situations may not work in your specific situation. So the examples she gave up front were of nudges that had been tried and tested in other countries very successfully. Another example is donor or organ donorship. That in many countries they've changed from an opt-in strategy to an opt-out strategy. But when that happened in the Netherlands, there was mass reaction to it, and it was really unsuccessful when it had been very successful in other countries. At this stage, when you're piloting, you don't need to think about metrics and a full quantitative evaluation of whether it's working or not. It's really about exploring how people are feeling about it, whether you're getting an indication it's starting to work, and whether or not you're getting any backlash. And I've given at the bottom here an example. So when we were developing the ideas within our project, everybody was really keen on sanctions and showing people up for misbehaving. And so we framed up these badges and sent them out. But when people actually saw this badge and thought about in situ somebody wearing one, they really weren't very happy with the negative badge of shaming somebody that they shared their password. And so that is something that we would have to address with a pilot and assess in more detail. Let me just give you another more fun example like we did at the beginning of how what you think is a good idea isn't always. Let me give you the example if I can run this. Oh, I can't run it. I've not even got the control. It's Dawn. I'm sitting here trying to click links. Dawn, can you run the video, please? Oh, can somebody unmute Dawn, please? Thanks, Dawn. So the Japanese do like their technology, don't they? And this was set up to encourage more use of public toilets, but by allowing people to see in before they use it, and also stop the embarrassment of trying the door and maybe somebody's forgotten to lock it. So the idea would be that you locked it and then it would go opaque. But of course, I think you could see people pushing their faces up against the windows and trying to assess whether or not people could see in before they chose to use the toilet. There's other similar examples of two-way mirrors being used on toilets so you can see out, but people can't see in. And again, it's just something that is an interesting nudge, but can easily backfire. Next. So the best way to try and evaluate a nudge is to set up a randomized control trial where you randomly assign people to either the control group or the nudge group. That both those groups must come from a very similar background so that there's nothing different between those two groups. And you can use basic statistics to test if there's a difference. This is the sort of gold standard because it allows you to be sure that it was nothing else in the environment that changed during the time that you implemented the nudge that actually caused the changes that you observed rather than the nudge itself. That's not always possible, and so sometimes we will do a comparison with a baseline where we'll measure the behavior before the nudge for a length of time and then immediately after, and again we can do basic statistics to see if it's a meaningful difference before and after. If possible, we want to obtain a direct measure of the actual behavior. That isn't always possible. But if we can, it would be better. If direct measurement of the behavior isn't available to us, then we may seek to introduce questionnaires, and we will give examples in our toolkit of the types of questionnaires that can be used. Alternatively, we may set up an observer to manually record the behavior that we're seeking at a particular site. But again, we have to recognize that just the observer being there can be a nudge in itself and change people's behavior. And the questions that we're trying to consider are, is there a measurable change? Is that change sustainable? And is there something else in the environment that might have accounted for that change? So this is probably the area that we've got least well developed within the toolkit at the moment, as it does require a bit of, we've said we don't need any technical knowledge, but it does require a bit of scientific method knowledge to do this well. So we're just trying to decide which level the tool should be written at. Next. And yeah, we see this as a continuous and iterative process. We do see this as something that you should have a member of staff, maybe within your security team, maybe it sits within your HR team, who is responsible for looking at the behaviors and the culture within the organization. So this process would be a continuous process of reassessing the risky behaviors that are occurring in the workplace, reassessing the priorities, designing new nudges, and continuously monitoring. We're also aware that nudges can go stale, so they can act to change behavior initially, but then their effectiveness wear off. So sometimes we have to just keep changing the nudges in the environment to keep the behavior that we want salient with the target audience. I think that's me finished. Is it, Dawn? Okay, yeah. So yeah, as we've said, toolkit is work in progress. we're still iterating and deciding on the tools that we need and the level that those tools should be developed at. And any input from yourselves and others is gratefully received. Thank you. So can we open up for general discussion and feedback?
Yeah, that was great. Thanks for bringing in the fun as well. Thanks a lot. Do we have any comments from the participants? Questions? How do you see the nudging tool? Just shout out if you've got anything to say. Put your hand up.
Hi, Panos again from Stockholm, Sweden.
Yeah, the floor is yours, Panos. Thanks a lot.
So no, I find it very interesting, all that you said during this workshop, and I think a toolkit that you can choose from whatever level or approach you come from in the organization. I think it would be interesting to try it in a pilot as yours, and really to first do the first step where you identify the areas that you want to work in your present organization. So I think there has to be these both approaches, like from the manager, the top down, and then the nudging tool comes from the bottom up to affect the behavior of the users.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we can nudge the top down as well. We can look to see what nudges work on the senior execs.
Yeah, they can be, I mean, a primary target as well. The seniors, the managers, and how actually they communicate with the staff.
Yes, and there's plenty of evidence from the phishing attacks that, yeah, they'll go after the senior staff or the senior staff's assistants, as they have the greatest access within an organization. So yeah, they should be our role models.
Yeah, anyone else got anything to add? We have about 20 minutes left of the webinar. We can move on to our polls if there aren't any other comments or questions. Okay, if not, then I think Rita, we can start on the polls. We're going to do a series of quick polls now. These will ask you for your, general views of what you've seen this morning, and looking at, is it fit, as we'll be asking if it's fit for purpose, and how it sits in terms of its novel approaches or otherwise, based on your knowledge of what's already been tried in the hospitals. And we've heard your own personal experiences, and I think that's been a really valuable input this morning. So Rita, we there? Can you launch the next poll, please? There we go. Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah,
Stephanie, sorry,
yes?
I want just to add one thing before starting the poll, just to make evident that the tool we are speaking about is a method. No? So what we are developing in this project is a method to define the actual nudges to be used in actual situations. Okay, I ask Line to confirm this. No.
Yes, it's a method. It's a toolkit to support a methodology of working through identifying behaviors and then nudges on those behaviors.
Obviously, in the project, in PANACEA project, we are applying the methodology also to test it and to customize it to the actual environment of the hospitals. But the actual output is the method. Then it will produce actual nudges, according to the case. So to deploy this means to teach people in the hospital, for instance, some people in the hospital on how to use the methodology, and then support them in its application, or let them apply it by themselves. Okay, so please. close my clarification or a highlight.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a good thing. In fact, obviously the proof is in the pudding, but yes, I think this is it's flexible. So the first question is, based on your role or field of expertise, do you think that, do you suggest changes to fine-tuning what you see in the methodology and the overall approach? Do you have yes, many suggestions, yes, some suggestions, or no suggestions? Now, would you suggest that we make changes to what's been presented? Obviously, has that, as Pasquale's just said, it's a method to define the measures that you would need, but do you feel a need for fine tuning? So Rita, can you just keep us
I
how
will
are we
also
in the voting?
Yes, I will end the polling because actually all the attendees replied and they have no suggestions at all.
Okay, oh, super. Okay, good, then we can move on to the next one. Okay, so no suggestions. Okay, move on to the next poll.
The other poll?
Yep, there should be a poll 4. Yeah, that's it. So this is then the questions on the fit for purpose, considering also a very specific context. And, as Lynn was saying, that some things can work in one place, but not in another. So maybe to bear this in mind. So based on your role or field of expertise, how would you rate the tool in terms of its usability? Not at all easy to use, not very easy, quite easy, or very easy. So how do you think, how easy would you find applying the methodology and the approach to secure behaviour measures?
Okay, I will also end the polling right now, and all the attendees said that it is not very easy to use.
Not very easy.
Yeah, that is a debate we're having, whether it's whether or not you actually have to have a member of staff, or whether it is a standalone toolkit that you can use with no experience. So yeah, we are concerned about that.
No, I think that this is important because the perception is that I suppose that in a hospital, for instance, it's difficult to find people, for instance, in the HR, for instance, or on the IT side, that have the needed background in order to apply the methodology by themselves. This is, I suppose, this is the.
Yeah, it is something that I'm pushing within the security industry, that, as well as having staff who have all the technical expertise, they should actually have people who have the human expertise as part of their team.
No, otherwise, this is also a way to, this consideration about the usability is leading to the idea, to me, that the type of product, let's say, that we deliver de facto is a consulting service, based on the methodology. So this could be the output, de facto. The best way could be that one. Obviously, if you have a mature reality where they have this type of people, maybe they go on by themselves. Yes.
Yes.
I don't know whether someone from the participants want to elaborate on this, because you gave this judgment of difficulty to use. What do you think about this? Okay, I suppose you think it is correct, the consideration.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on.
Okay, so the next poll then, please, Rita. So this is asking you, how would you rate the tool in terms of its usefulness? So is it not at all useful, not very useful, slightly useful, or very useful? and then Rita just share the results when you have them in, okay? Thanks.
Maybe we can just wait another couple of seconds and then I
sure.
will
Yeah.
share the results. Okay, I will end the polling now, and actually here we have 50% of the attendees that said it is very useful, and the other half that instead is saying that it is slightly useful.
Okay, thanks very much. I don't know if there are any other additional comments to add to this. I guess we've kind of discussed it in the last point, but yeah.
So maybe I will move on the next poll.
Okay.
Can you all see the next question that is coming right now?
Yeah, this, in fact, you know, as we've been talking about different contexts and behavioural patterns, and this question is asking, you know, considering the very specific context of the hospital, and you know, all of the things we've been talking about this morning, basically, do you think that it fulfills those specific requirements? So it doesn't capture any of the healthcare specificities. It captures a few of them, many of them, or it fully captures them all. So I'll give you a minute or so to reply.
Okay, and in this case, we have actually all the attendees that agree that it captures many health HC specificities. So you can see the results now.
Okay, so there's unanimous on that one. Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Should we move on to the others?
So the poll number 7 is also coming.
Yeah. So again, this is another one on the fit for purpose. So how would you rate the Secure Behaviour Nudging Tool in terms of its completeness of functions? Not at all complete, not that complete, quite complete, but missing some elements, or is it very complete? Looking at it, you know, broadly.
I guess I would ask you to look at whether what we're proposing is a complete solution, as I realise that we didn't present you with finished tools, but the suggestions for that tool, do you think that's a complete toolkit, or are we missing something?
Yeah.
Okay, and also here we have half of the attendees that is saying that it is very complete, and the other half that instead is saying that it is quite complete, but it is missing some elements.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, let's move on to the next one.
It would be nice, I don't know if the participants want to elaborate on, it would be really useful to know what they think is missing, if they've got ideas for things that should be covered.
Yeah, the floor is open to the participants if they want to make comments on that. What is missing, or what do you feel could be missing? You should just be able to unmute if you do have a comment. If not, we'll move on. We might have a few minutes at the end to make some more general comments as we wrap up. So let's move on to the next poll then. Yeah. So now we're looking at how the solution fits into the what's already out there, or based on your knowledge or personal experiences. So how would you rate the tool in terms of its innovativeness? We have an option here to say that you're not aware of any similar solutions. The other options are it's behind, it's like other solutions, it's somewhat innovative, or is it very innovative?
Okay, here actually we have again 50% of the team that is saying that it is very innovative, so it is very positive, and instead the other half that is saying that they are not aware of any similar solutions. Okay, so I will move to the next section.
Yeah, I was muted. We're open to comments at any time, so we just stop and, you know, we'll close the, if you see another poll coming up but want to comment on the previous poll, just open your mics and comment. Yeah, you're free. So this is an open discussion. You can pop and stick up your hand. Okay, so the next question then, again, state of the art. This question is asking you how you would rate it in terms of its usability. And again, we have the option of not being familiar with anything similar. Or is it less complete or like others? That should read, it's less usable, has the same usability of others, solutions, bit more useful. Usable, or absolutely much more useful. So we made a mistake on the options.
Here all the attendees already replied, and 50% of them said that they are not aware of any similar solutions, and instead the other half they say that this tool is actually like all the others.
Okay, thanks a lot. Remember that you're free to speak at any time. If not, we'll move on. We've got 6 minutes left. We'll move on to I think we'll have just a couple of polls left. Yeah. Oh, I think there's been a small mistake here because it's useful. Oh no, this is usefulness. So again, as some of you have already indicated, you're not aware of anything similar. Is it less useful if you are familiar with something similar? Is it just as useful, a bit more useful, or much more useful?
We already got the replies.
Okay.
And here again, 50% is not aware of any similar solutions, and the other half, they say that it is equally as useful.
Okay, thanks very much. We can move on then. And yes, so this is asking you if there's something missing compared to what's already available. Again, we have that option. I'm not aware of any similar solutions. Otherwise, you can pick from less complete, equally as complete, a bit more complete, or much more complete. I think the answers to these questions are going to be quite similar. We seem to have a pattern coming through.
Yeah,
yeah.
Indeed. In this case, I mean, again, 50% of the attendees are not aware of any similar solutions, and the other ones instead, they say that it is absolutely more complete.
Okay, that's a positive one. Okay,
yeah.
Thanks very much.
And the last one now.
Yeah. So how much do you think there's a need to address behaviour using a tool like this? Is there no need, a low need, some need, or a high need?
Okay, here actually we have a very positive replies in general, because 50% of the team is saying that there is a high need, and the other half that there is some need.
Okay, so that's consensus on the need for it. Okay, just to, before, if anyone would like panelists or participants to add a few comments to wrap up, or you have a question, please take the floor, feel free to take the floor. They can all unmute, can't they, the participants, Rita? Yeah?
Yeah, they can,
Okay.
all of them.
Hi, from Panos from Stockholm here.
Mm-hmm.
So in our organization, like many organizations, the rate limiting factor, of course, is time to invest in any behavioral change for all different matters, not only cybersecurity. So this is tricky. I mean, how to, I mean, it's a combination of, I mean, as we said before, managerial, like to outline the guidelines or the path that one organization needs to take or to have, and to follow those, and also from the actual users and users to foster a sound behavior. I mean, around like not maybe to do private stuff on the working computers and stuff that could jeopardize, or to download stuff. So there has to be a combination, and then time to invest to educate those people. That's a rate limiting.
Yeah. Don't know, Lynn, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I agree. I think it's something we have to look at in terms of our influencing strategy, and the way that we try and implement the toolkit, so that we take up as little time as possible for as big benefits as possible. I guess I'm hoping that, you know, if we get some pilots and start showing the benefits, it'll be an easier sell. But yeah, that work's still to be done.
Yeah. So for sure, we'll be coming back to this really interesting topic. And just to remind you that the very last session in our series is this looking at cybersecurity training and education in healthcare organisations. It starts this afternoon at 3:30, and it should be a short one. We expect to conclude in around 45 to 50 minutes. I'll pass the floor to you, and as a second, Pasquale, for a final comment. But I would also like to thank you very much for joining today and for sharing some really interesting points of view. I'll leave the floor to you, Pasquale, before we close.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. Yes, attaching myself to the last consideration, I want to highlight that we are applying this methodology at Gemelli Hospital, and I think that okay, Gemelli Hospital has 4,000 staff people, so the workshop have involved, let's say, in total 30 people for 2 hours each, and probably something similar will happen in the next steps. I think it is an investment that could be worth doing. So even if there is not, it may imply some effort in designing the nudges, it can have a high return in a hospital, for instance, where you have many staff members. Said that, I thank you very much, the participants, for the fruitful discussion that we had. I suppose that Lynn and Dawn can get some interesting feedback now from what has come out. So I thank you again. I don't know whether Lynn, Dawn, you want to say something, and then we close.
No, I'd just like to thank you all. Since you are from other research projects, if you do want to keep in touch with us, I see Dawn has put her email there. You can contact us via Dawn. We're happy for any sort of collaborations with other projects to help further the behaviour change aspects.
So thank you very much.
I'd also like to echo those words. So we definitely need to put out the user story from the Gemelli and make it known more as widely as possible, to sort of people can start seeing the benefits. Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks again for your comments. Bye for now.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You all. Bye bye.